Today we're going to cover, is it really that loud in the front for those who are close to the subs when they're ground stacked? I usually like getting mine up in the air so they can be paired with the mains and be more even with them, but sometimes due to rigging restraints or weight or budget, you have to put it on the ground. So it's not the worst thing in the world, but today I wanted to actually measure how bad is it. So today I chose this venue because it has a very, very long range ratio when it's the sub that's right here in front of me to the first row versus this all the way to the back row. It's a long way, a big discrepancy. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna place microphones here at the very front, at the back of this section, at front of house, and the very back, and compare them and see how bad is it? Is it really that big of a discrepancy? We can predict in advance what it might be because we know these distances, but does it actually show up? Do things like the room affect the response? Do we have actually other subs on the sides of the stage? Are they gonna play into it? So let's go back to front of house, verify our microphones to make sure they're cooperating, then we'll place them out in the house and take some measurements. Let's go. So now we're here at front of house. This is my setup. I'm running my interface into the front of house console, the CL5, and that's feeding the system processor. It's just on an empty channel with no processing at all. If I could run it into the DSP directly, I could, but I can't here. So this is where we are at. From there, I control if it's going to the mains or the subs. But first what we want to do, like I said, is verify our microphones. So I got all four of them right here at the same horizontal position, all pointed at that main speaker. It's just a single point source main. It's all there. And my concern is getting the same measurement on each microphone to make sure that all are working correctly. So here, over here in my Evo 8 software, I've set the preamp gain to be equal on all the microphones. So we're going to start, got about 40 dB of gain, and we're going to see if that's working right. So minimize this guy. I'm going to fire up some pink. It's coming in a little bit low, but I know it's going to be a lot hotter later since I'm going to have the microphone so close to the subs, so I'm okay with leaving this type of headroom. I'll stop talking for a second and let the averages settle down, but right now I'm liking what I'm seeing. All my traces are looking pretty equal, so I'll clear my averager. I got them all here. And so all my microphones are looking the same here at the measurement here at front of house. I'm hopefully going to be tuning the system in the future once they get another part in to fix something with the mains. But all that being said, we're looking pretty even here with all my microphones. So now I can start distributing them around the room. Now that we've placed our microphones, I actually took my laser and measured the distance of the front row to the sub versus all the way in the back to the front sub. And the front row is 9 feet, and the back row all the way up there is 85 feet. So that's about a 9.5 to 1 range ratio. So it's 9.5 times farther for the low end to get to the back to the front row. So if we convert that to decibels, that's almost a 20 dB difference. So that's what I'm expecting to see here in the software front to back, but let's see if that's actually the case. So right now I just got my subs on. I'm not worried about using the delay finder to get all the phase traces to match, since I'm just looking at level today. But if I were tuning the rig, we do that and use my mains and all that. But we're just looking at level today. So let me kick it on. All right, capture this folder. And let's look at what we got. So the green trace, as a reminder, very front, and then moving here to orange, then to pink, then to yellow is the order. One thing I noticed for sure right off the bat is on the green trace, 63 hertz is basically non-existent compared to the others. So I'm seeing a peak here and then not in the back. Otherwise, they're tracking much closer here in this very bottom octave. But I also think what's playing into it is some of like the really low AC rumble and what's going on. But we can also look at our coherence trace here at the top to figure that out. So our coherence, we're going to see slowly rise as we move forward into the room because we have less reverberation. So if I go through these traces, you see that up here, it's very sure it's what it is. And it rose even farther up, and then now even farther being at the very front row. So I'm not going to put a whole lot of faith in the data down here, even though the coherence is pretty high in the very front, just because there is so much AC noise with what's going on, but I think we could still use some of it. So I am seeing right here a drop at about 50 hertz across all the traces. I think that's because the subs are in a cavity. The sound is bouncing off the back and then comes to the front. We're getting a cancellation. That's just my guess. We are in the center of the room, so it could just be a room mode thing at the very center, but usually that would be a peak, not a dip. So just kind of guessing here. I'm not the most knowledgeable acoustician out there, but I'm just trying to see what's happening with this data. But all that being said, if we just solo the front to back measurements, we'll clear this, we see the very rear versus the very back. So if I look at this trace, its peak here at 40 hertz is 7.97, and here at 40 hertz is 13.15. So that's about 6 dB or so of difference. So that's really not that big of a difference considering we're expecting 20. But if I move here to 63 hertz and almost an octave up, I've got 13.18 at the top versus negative 4.19. So that is a lot closer to our 20 dB mark, probably about 18, 19 or so. But then we actually meet here at 79 hertz. So this is just above like the open D string at a bass guitar would feel equal. And I've actually mixing here before, have felt that like D is very resonant in this room. And so that's interesting that we're seeing that verified with data. But comparing here to the other microphones, we're actually seeing a very similar level in the middle of the room. These are actually tracking very closely, at least at their peaks in the low end. So we are still seeing a gradual raising of energy as we move forward. But here are the notes I really wanted to make. It's not an equal distribution at every frequency because we're in an acoustic environment that has reflections, and it's not as big of a discrepancy because of something called room gain. We're having the other subs in the room bounce around, contribute energy to the back, so we're not seeing this huge discrepancy. Again, we need to be cognizant at front of house that we're not mixing it too hot because it is going to be a lot higher for that person. So that's why it's like taking these measurements front to back to measure it and see, is it really going to be that bad? So how can we solve this? It's two things. We can get subs in the air with the mains so that they are tracking more equally. Because what I'm going to do now is now we're going to measure the mains and go back and see, is it changing at the same rate or not? Now I'm going to measure the mains and see if we're getting a similar front to back difference. And I'm willing to bet it's going to be less since we are in the air, since we have less than that range ratio a good bit. Great. So we're seeing they're tracking much tighter to each other. So if I go to our very front microphone right here through the mid-range, it's at negative 18 right there. I know the level's a lot lower because I was measuring the subs hotter. Yeah, we're still tracking very closely. So if I normalize them here at 4K, let's look at their offsets. The A microphones to the very back at 4K got boosted 0.84 dB. And the very front one only got boosted 1 dB, and this one 0.6, and that 1.91. So they're tracking very closely in the top end, which we want out of a system. Because we are closer in the front, the low mids are looking a little bit different, but again, really, it's really not that bad. So this was a good design with the tops when trying to keep things even front to back. Can some improvements be made? Absolutely, but they did a good job here of making sure that front to back is looking good. But again, marrying that with our subs not being as even front to back, we have definitely a much bigger rate of change. Again, I'm not trying to dog on this integrator at all and say this was a bad idea putting stuff on the floor. I mean, maybe they couldn't fly stuff, maybe there was budget cuts, maybe just they couldn't do it with rigging. I'm just saying if you are in a situation with subs on the ground, this is what you need to be aware of. So just know that the rate of change front to back is going to be different from your mains versus your subs, and make sure to measure it front of house and see how loud that is going to be. What may feel good here may not necessarily be that great in the front row, but even then the measured differences weren't as bad as the predicted differences. So that's what I wanted to end with. All right. Threw a lot of numbers at you, but thanks for hanging out with me. Appreciate you hanging here. I'm Michael Curtis. I'll catch you next time.